Private Adama Kone sat on the edge of his narrow army bed, staring at a blank piece of paper. The sounds of the camp echoed outside. Metal clanking, boots crunching on dirt, men shouting orders. But inside the small, hot room, it was quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled like dust, sweat, and something burnt. His hands were shaking slightly. Not because he was scared. He was used to fear by now. It was something else. Something heavier. Something that made his chest feel tight. It had been a hard month. His unit had been ambushed twice. 3 of his closest friends were gone. Their boots were still under their beds, untouched. The food supplies were low. Their rifles jammed too often. Their requests for backup never got answered. Adama felt like they had been forgotten. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat up, grabbed a pen, and began to write. It wasn't the kind of letter soldiers usually write. It wasn't to his mother or to his brother back in Ouagadougou. It was a letter to someone far away, someone powerful, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of the country. He didn't plan it. It just came out. "Dear Captain," he wrote, "I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. I don't even know if anyone will care, but I have to try." He told him everything, not just about the attacks and the broken weapons. He wrote about the fear in his comrades' eyes, the silence after gunfire, the way some soldiers now whispered about deserting. "We are not afraid to fight," he wrote, "but we can't win with empty hands." He didn't complain. He didn't beg. He just told the truth. When he finished, the sun was rising. Orange lights slid across the floor. The camp was waking up again. Adama folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt. He wasn't sure what to do next. Later that day, while helping unload supply crates that were mostly empty, he walked up to his officer and asked quietly, "Can I send a letter?" The officer looked confused, then shrugged. "If you want, give it to the radio man." Adama handed the letter over, not expecting anything to happen. A week passed. Nothing changed. They still stood guard at night, still ran low on bullets. He thought the letter had vanished into some dusty file, never to be seen again. Then, early one morning, a black military truck rolled into the base. It wasn't from their region. It had a special mark on the side, something Adama didn't recognize. A soldier with dark glasses stepped out and looked around. "Who is Private Adama Kone?" the man asked. Everyone stared. Adama raised his hand slowly. "You're coming with us," the man said. "Presidential orders." Adama's heart skipped. He looked around, unsure if it was a joke. But the soldier was serious, very serious. As he climbed into the back of the truck, his fellow soldiers watched in silence. Some looked confused, some looked proud, others looked scared for him. Adama didn't speak. He sat down, staring at the road ahead. He didn't know where he was going or why. He only knew one thing. The letter had been read. The truck bounced along the dirt road, the heat rising off the ground like a wave. Adama sat at the back, his hands clenched on his lap, trying to ignore the way the dust settled on his skin. The soldier in front of him was silent, eyes straight ahead, looking as though nothing in the world could surprise him anymore. Adama didn't know where he was going, only that it wasn't anywhere good. He had read about the presidential compound in books, heard whispers from older soldiers about its power, but it all felt like a dream now, like he was living in someone else's story. The journey was long, and the only sounds were the engine and the occasional cough of the driver. The landscape blurred by, villages, hills, dry rivers, all blending together in the golden haze of late afternoon. As they neared the capital, Adama's mind raced. What did they want with him? Why had the letter reached someone so high up? He wasn't special. He wasn't anyone important. Just a soldier trying to do his job. They passed through the gates of the compound, and Adama's heart skipped a beat. Tall concrete walls rose high around them, armed guards at every corner, all eyes on the truck. It was nothing like the barracks he had known. The place felt more like a fortress than a military base. When the truck finally stopped, the soldier turned to Adama and said, "You're to follow me." Adama stepped out, his legs stiff from the long ride. The heat of the compound was even worse than the outside air. He was led into a building with high ceilings and polished floors. Soldiers stood at attention as he walked past, all of them watching him carefully. His stomach churned. Why was everyone so serious? Why was he here? He was brought to a small office. It wasn't much, just a desk, a few chairs, and a large map on the wall. A single lamp lit the room, casting shadows on the walls. And then, sitting behind the desk, was someone Adama knew by name but had never met, General Defrest. The man's eyes were sharp, his face hard as stone. "Private Kone," he said in a voice that left no room for softness. "Sit down." Adama did as he was told, but his mind was spinning. He couldn't speak, not at first. His mouth felt dry. "You've caused quite a stir," the general continued, looking over a piece of paper. "That letter you sent, it made it all the way to the president." Adama blinked, unsure if he had heard right. "The president?" he asked softly. The general nodded slowly. "Yes. And now, we need to talk." The next few minutes felt like they dragged on forever. Adama sat in silence, barely understanding the words that were being said to him. They asked about his unit, about the situation at the front lines. But it wasn't just about what had happened. It was about why he had written. "You didn't just ask for help," the general said, his voice growing colder. "You told the truth. You didn't hide behind orders or excuses." Adama didn't know what to say. He had just written what he had felt, what he had seen, nothing more. "You may not realize it, Private," General Defrest went on, "but that letter showed something important. Courage. A willingness to speak the truth even when no one else does." The words hit Adama harder than he expected. Courage. All he had done was tell the truth. The general stood up and walked to a nearby shelf, picking up a small black folder. "You'll be taken to the president's office. He wants to see you." Adama was too shocked to respond. He stood up, his legs feeling weaker than ever. What had he gotten himself into? He was led out of the room, through hallways that seemed endless, until they reached a large door. Two soldiers stood guard in front of it, their eyes cold and alert. The door opened, and there, sitting at a desk, was President Ibrahim Traoré. Adama stood frozen at the doorway, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. The air smelled different here, cleaner, cooler. Everything seemed so formal. Polished floors, white walls, and the faint hum of a fan in the corner. The only thing that stood out was the man sitting behind the large desk. President Ibrahim Traoré. He had heard about the president, of course. Everyone had. Traoré was once a soldier, just like him, and had risen to power through his courage and leadership. People whispered stories of him, how he had led troops through impossible battles, how he had become a symbol of hope in a country that had known too much suffering. Yet now, in front of him, Adama didn't know what to feel. Nervous, scared, honored. President Traoré didn't speak right away. He just sat there, watching Adama with an intense, focused gaze. It was like he was studying him, trying to figure out who this young soldier was. "Sit down, Private," the president finally said, his voice calm but firm. There was no warmth in it, but there was something else, something that made Adama feel like this was important, like he should listen carefully. Adama quickly took a seat, his knees shaking slightly. He tried to hide it, but he couldn't help feeling small in the president's presence. After all, this was the man who had changed the course of the country, and here he was, sitting across from him. "I've read your letter," President Traoré said. His eyes didn't leave Adama's face. "You spoke about the failures, the struggles, the fear your comrades are facing on the front lines." Adama nodded, unsure of what to say. He had written that letter in the heat of the moment, out of frustration, out of a sense of helplessness. It was nothing special, just the truth. But hearing the president mention it made it feel so much bigger than it had been. You didn't just complain, the president continued. You spoke of the truth, and that truth is not easy to hear, but it's necessary. A soldier must know the truth if he is to lead others into battle. And you, Private, have done something that most others wouldn't dare. Adama's mind raced. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He was just a soldier, following orders, trying to survive. I'm not a leader, sir, he said quietly. The president's lips curved slightly. You may not see it, but in that letter you showed leadership. Real leadership, the kind that can change things. Adama swallowed hard. He didn't know what to say. He had never thought of himself that way. He had just written down what he saw, what he felt. We need more soldiers like you, President Traoré said, his tone still serious but softer now. We need men who will not be afraid to speak up. Men who will not turn a blind eye to the problems they face, but will instead work to fix them. That's what you've done. Adama sat in silence, absorbing the weight of the president's words. He didn't feel like he had done anything extraordinary. All he had done was share the truth. But now, hearing the president say those words, he realized maybe it wasn't so simple after all. I'm going to give you a new role, Private, President Traoré said. You're going to be part of something bigger than yourself. You're going to help lead your fellow soldiers. We need people like you, who can see what's wrong and work to make it right. Adama's mind was spinning. Lead. Him. It was too much, too sudden. You have a lot to learn, the president said, standing up. But I believe you're ready. Before Adama could respond, President Traoré walked around the desk and placed his hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of encouragement. This is just the beginning, he said quietly. Remember that. Adama didn't know what to think. His mind was still reeling. But one thing was clear now. His life had changed forever. As he stood up to leave, the president's voice followed him. Your journey is just starting, Private, and it won't be easy. But I have faith in you. Adama nodded, though he wasn't sure if he had faith in himself. But maybe, just maybe, he would learn to. Adama walked out of the room, his mind a whirlwind. He could still feel the weight of the president's words on his shoulders. His steps were slow as he made his way down the long corridor, trying to make sense of what had just happened. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. Something had shifted. He had no idea what was expected of him now, but he could feel the pressure building inside him. As he reached the end of the hall, he was met by the same soldier who had brought him here. The man's expression was unreadable, but there was something about the way he looked at Adama that made him feel both small and important at the same time. Follow me, the soldier said. Adama didn't ask any questions. He just followed. The silence between them was heavy, but he didn't mind. He needed time to think, to understand what was happening. Nothing was making sense. He had written a letter out of frustration, and now, here he was, being told he was part of something bigger than himself. He wasn't sure if he was ready for it, but there was no turning back now. They walked through another series of halls, each one looking the same, clean, sterile, and quiet. Finally, they reached a small, nondescript room. The soldier knocked once before opening the door. Inside, a man in a suit stood by a table, looking at a map. He turned as they entered, and Adama immediately recognized the uniform. The man was a general, one of the highest-ranking officers in the military. The general gave a brief nod to Adama before turning to the soldier. "Leave us," the general said. The soldier saluted and left, closing the door behind him. Adama stood there, unsure of what was coming next. The general motioned for him to sit at the small table, and without waiting for a response, he walked over to a cabinet in the corner. When he returned, he was holding a small black box. "This," the general said, placing the box in front of Adama, "is for you." Adama looked at the box, confused. He wasn't sure what to expect. The general opened the box slowly, revealing a medal inside. The medal was beautiful, golden, with a design of a soldier holding a rifle, surrounded by an olive branch. There was a small inscription at the bottom, but Adama couldn't make out the words. "This," the general continued, "is the medal for bravery. It's not given lightly, and it's not something we give to just anyone." Adama felt a lump form in his throat. He didn't understand. He hadn't done anything special. He had just written a letter. It didn't feel like bravery. It didn't feel like anything worth a medal. "This medal," the general went on, "isn't something most people even know exists. It's not public, and we don't give it out often. But you've earned it." Adama looked down at the medal again, his hands shaking slightly. He hadn't even realized he had been holding his breath. "You've shown something we don't see enough of in this army, the courage to speak out when others are too afraid," the general said. "The courage to stand up and tell the truth, even when it's hard." Adama swallowed. He hadn't done it for a medal. He hadn't done it for recognition. He had done it because he felt like it was the right thing to do. But now, sitting here with this medal in front of him, he realized that maybe, just maybe, it had been more than he thought. The general's eyes softened as he looked at Adama. "You don't need to wear it right away," he said. "Take some time. Understand what it means, because it's not just about what you've done. It's about what you're going to do next." Adama nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. He hadn't asked for any of this. He hadn't expected anything. Yet here he was, holding a medal that nobody even knew existed. It felt unreal. "Go," the general said, breaking the silence. "We'll see you again soon." Adama stood up, still holding the box with the medal inside. He didn't say anything as he left the room. The hallway felt different now, quieter, almost as if the walls were closing in on him. His thoughts were scattered, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a letter anymore. It wasn't just about the army. It was about something much bigger. As he stepped outside, the weight of the medal in his hand felt heavier than he had expected. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. It was time to make a choice. Time to become the soldier everyone hoped he could be. Adama walked back to his room, still holding the small box with the medal inside. The weight of it felt strange in his hands. He wasn't sure if he deserved it. After all, what had he really done? He had only written a letter. He had only told the truth. Was that enough to earn such a symbol of bravery? As he walked through the compound, the sounds of soldiers training, talking, and moving around him seemed distant. His mind kept going back to the battlefield, to the days when things had felt so much simpler, when he had been just a soldier, following orders without question, when everything had been black and white. But now, everything was different. The letter, the medal, the president's words, nothing felt simple anymore. He sat down on his bed and closed his eyes. The memories flooded back. It was only a few months ago, but it felt like a lifetime. His unit had been sent to a small village near the border, a place that had been under constant attack from insurgents. The mission had seemed straightforward: secure the village, protect the civilians, and hold the line until reinforcements arrived. But nothing went as planned. The first night, they had been ambushed. Gunfire had erupted from every direction, and the soldiers had scrambled for cover. Adama had felt his heart racing, his hands slick with sweat. He remembered the screams of his comrades, the sounds of bullets whizzing by, the feeling of being completely exposed. They fought back as best they could, but the enemy was too close, too well prepared. Adama's unit had been outnumbered. They hadn't expected the attack to come so fast, and the weapons they had weren't enough. In the chaos, Adama had lost track of time. He had been following orders, fighting, taking cover, and trying to protect the civilians trapped in the village. But when the call to retreat came, he froze. He could still hear the command in his ears: fall back now. Everyone else had started moving, but Adama hadn't moved. He looked around at the people hiding in the school building, the children who were too scared to run, the elderly who couldn't get to safety fast enough. And something inside him snapped. He knew the order was to retreat. He knew it was the right decision in the moment. But he couldn't leave them behind. He couldn't turn his back on those people. So, instead of running, he had done the unthinkable. He had broken the order. He ordered the remaining soldiers to stay and protect the civilians. He led them back into the school, setting up a defensive position and holding off the attackers long enough for the villagers to escape. They fought until the reinforcements arrived, but by then, Adama's unit had taken heavy losses. The battle had been won, but at a great cost. That night, Adama had sat alone, staring at the bodies of his fallen comrades. He felt the weight of the lives they had lost. They had followed orders. They had done their duty. But Adama had done something different, something against the rules. The truth was, he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had just tried to do what was right. Adama opened his eyes and looked at the box in his hands. The metal inside didn't change the past. It didn't bring back the men he had lost. It didn't erase the guilt he felt every time he thought about that night. But it did remind him of something important. The days after the meeting with President Traoré felt strange for Adama. Everything around him seemed the same, yet somehow everything had changed. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was now part of something bigger, part of the plan to make a difference. But he wasn't sure where to start. His comrades still didn't know about the medal. He hadn't told anyone. He didn't want to. He didn't feel like he deserved it. But that didn't stop the pressure from growing. Every time he looked at the medal, it felt like it weighed him down more. One morning, as Adama was cleaning his rifle, his officer came to him with a new mission. It wasn't unusual. Soldiers got orders all the time. But this time, there was something different in his officer's voice. Something serious. "Private Kone," the officer said, looking straight at him, "you're going out with a special team today. There's a village near the border that's been taken over. We're going in to clear it. It's dangerous, but we need it done." Adama nodded, trying to hide the anxiety that suddenly gripped him. The last time he had been on a mission like this, he had lost so much. The thought of going back into another battle made his stomach churn, but he knew he couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. The team gathered quickly. It was a small group, just enough soldiers to get in and out without drawing too much attention. The mission was clear. Clear the village, take control of the area, and ensure that the insurgents who had taken over were removed. Adama was assigned to lead a small unit into the heart of the village. It wasn't the first time he had led a team, but it was the first time since the attack that had changed everything for him. His hand shook slightly as he checked his gear, but he didn't let it show. He couldn't. Not now. They boarded a truck and began the journey to the village. The road was rough, and the further they went, the more tense the atmosphere became. The silence in the truck was heavy. No one spoke. Everyone was focused. Adama couldn't help but think about the men who had died in the previous mission. Would this be their fate too? Would they return from this one? As they neared the village, the air grew thick with tension. Adama could hear the sound of gunfire in the distance. The battle had already started. When they reached the village outskirts, Adama gave the signal, and his team disembarked. They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows, staying low. The village was eerily quiet, but Adama could feel the danger around them. He could feel the eyes of the insurgents watching them from hidden places. They moved into position, preparing for the next steps. Adama's heart was racing. This wasn't like the training. This wasn't just following orders. This was real. And the consequences of failure were high. As they moved deeper into the village, they encountered their first resistance. Shots rang out, and Adama instinctively dropped to the ground, signaling his team to return fire. The sound of gunfire filled the air, echoing in the narrow streets. Adama's mind went back to that first battle, the one that had changed everything for him. It had felt like this: chaos, fear, and the constant threat of death. But now, There was something different inside him. He wasn't just following orders anymore. He was thinking for himself, making decisions in the heat of battle. They pushed forward, inch by inch, clearing buildings and taking control of key positions. Adama led them with calm determination, his focus sharp. He knew that every step they took brought them closer to safety, closer to victory. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last of the insurgents were defeated. The village was secured. The mission was a success. But as Adama stood in the middle of the quiet village, looking at the faces of his team, he felt a strange emptiness. They had won. They had done their job. But the cost of victory always lingered. The bodies of the fallen soldiers, the villagers who had been caught in the crossfire, the fear that never really left. Adama took a deep breath and looked at the horizon. It was over. For now. But he knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more missions, more battles, and each one would test him in ways he couldn't predict. But whatever happened, he was ready. He had no choice. Adama stood at the edge of the village, looking out over the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. Everything seemed calm now, but Adama knew better than to trust the silence. The village was secured, yes, but the danger was always just beneath the surface. And after the battle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. He walked back to the small building where his team had gathered. They were sitting in silence, cleaning their weapons or checking their gear, trying to relax after the intense hours of fighting. Adama didn't join them right away. Instead, he stood in the doorway, watching his comrades. They had done well today. No one had been seriously injured, and the mission had been completed successfully. But Adama couldn't help but think about the next time. The next mission, the next fight. Would they be as lucky then? He knew the answer. Luck didn't last forever. Private Kone. A voice called from behind him. Adama turned to see his officer, Captain Sori, walking toward him. The captain was a tall man, his face serious and worn from years of service. There was a kind of quiet authority in the way he carried himself. "Sir," Adama said, standing up straighter. "How are you holding up?" the captain asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Adama didn't answer right away. He wasn't sure what to say. He felt the weight of everything. The mission, the lives lost, the pressure of the medal he still couldn't quite understand. "I'm fine, sir," he said, trying to sound confident. But the captain saw through it. "You don't have to pretend," Captain Sori said. "I know what it's like. I've been where you are." Adama looked at the captain, trying to read his expression. The captain had been through many battles. He had seen the horrors of war up close, and somehow, despite it all, he was still here, still leading. "It's not the fighting that's the hardest part," Captain Sori continued. "It's the waiting. The moments when you're not sure what's coming next, when you know there's more to come, but you don't know when or where." Adama nodded. He understood that. The waiting was always the hardest part. The calm before the storm, as they called it. You never knew if it would be hours, days, or weeks before the next fight. And when it came, it would always be sudden, always violent. "You're not alone in this, Kone," the captain added. "We're all in it together. That's what keeps us going. That's what keeps us alive." Adama looked around at the men sitting in the room, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Some of them were still young, barely old enough to carry a weapon, while others were veterans, hardened by years of service. They all carried their own burdens, their own fears, but they carried them together. And that, Adama realized, was what made them strong. "Thank you, sir," Adama said quietly. He felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel so alone. Maybe he wasn't ready to lead yet, but he knew that he didn't have to do it by himself. He had his team. He had his brothers in arms. Captain Sori gave a small smile. "Get some rest, Private. Tomorrow will come soon enough." As Adama lay down on the cot later that night, He closed his eyes and let the exhaustion take over. The events of the day had drained him, but his mind was still racing. There was so much more to come, so many more battles to fight. But for now, he would rest, because tomorrow, the storm would come again, and when it did, Adama would be ready. The next morning came quickly, as mornings often do in the army. The sun had barely risen, and already the camp was buzzing with activity. Soldiers were gathering their equipment, checking their rifles, and preparing for the day ahead. Adama sat up in his cot, his muscles sore from the day before, but his mind was alert. He couldn't afford to lose focus now, not when the mission was just beginning. Captain Traoré had told them that they would be heading out to a new location, a place deeper in enemy territory. The mission this time was different. It wasn't about clearing a village or securing a border. This time, they were to gather intelligence. They had to find out what the enemy was planning and how they were organizing. As Adama stood up and pulled on his gear, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The calm they had felt after their last mission seemed too quiet, too peaceful. He knew that war didn't work like that. There were no pauses, no breaks. It was always moving, always changing. His team gathered outside the main building. Captain Traoré was standing at the front, speaking in low tones to a few other officers. When he saw Adama and the rest of the team, he waved them over. "This is going to be tricky," the captain said, his face serious. "We'll be moving through hostile territory. You know the drill. Stay quiet, stay focused, and stay together." Adama nodded, but he couldn't help but feel nervous. This wasn't like the previous missions. There was no clear enemy to fight, no walls to breach. This mission was about gathering information, but that also meant they would be exposed for longer. They couldn't just fight their way out if things went wrong. As they made their way to the trucks, Adama's mind raced. He thought back to the medal, to the words of President Traoré. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like someone who deserved such recognition. All he had done was follow his instincts. Was that enough, or had he made a mistake? The truck ride felt long and uncomfortable, the air thick with tension. The soldiers sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Adama stared out the window, watching the landscape change as they drove deeper into the country. The roads grew rougher, and the signs of war became more visible. Abandoned buildings, charred remains of vehicles, and the occasional soldier patrolling the area. When they finally arrived at their destination, the team disembarked and began their approach. The area was a small village, not much different from the one they had cleared days earlier. But this time, there were fewer civilians. This time, there were only the enemy. They moved quickly but quietly, sticking to the shadows as they made their way through the village. Adama's heart pounded in his chest. Every step felt like it could be their last. The silence around them was heavy, too heavy. After hours of searching, they finally found what they had been looking for, a hidden building where the enemy was storing weapons and supplies. It was exactly what they needed to report back to headquarters. But as they moved closer, Adama's instincts told him something was wrong. He motioned for the team to stop. There was a faint sound, like footsteps, coming from the other side of the building. The soldiers tensed, ready to fight if necessary. "Stay low," Captain Traoré whispered. Adama's mind raced. They couldn't afford to be discovered now. They had to finish the mission and get out. But the tension was building. He could feel it in the air. This was their moment. This was the test. If they could stay calm, if they could work together, they would make it through. But if they made a mistake, if they were spotted. Suddenly, a shot rang out in the distance. The team froze. The sound was clear, sharp, and unmistakable. "They know we're here," Captain Traoré said, his voice steady despite the danger. Adama's heart skipped a beat. The test had begun. And this time, there was no turning back.